User Charges Legislation Amendment Bill that is going to be dealing with fast tractors. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
Order. I'm calling Julianne Genter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on behalf of the Green Party on the Road User Charges and Land Transport Legislation Amendment Bill 2013. The Green Party sees no reason to oppose the bill at this time. It's pretty minor. I'm looking at the regulatory impact statement now. The key proposals in this bill, which have already been explained by other members in the House tonight, are to exempt fast tractors from road user charges and subject them to an annual charge instead. The other proposal in this bill is to exempt all unregistered vehicles from road user charges and apply an annual charge.
Order. I'm sorry. I would actually like to hear what the member's saying. Julianne Genter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the other major proposal, as I was saying, in this bill is to exempt all unregistered vehicles from road user charges and instead apply an annual charge. There are 6 other proposals which are supposedly going to improve the functioning of the road user charges system. They're so minor in nature and impact, and there's very limited information available. So it was difficult for the officials to provide a very thorough analysis in the regulatory impact statement. I think it's worth saying, although the Green Party has no reason to oppose this bill, that it's a bit of a missed opportunity to get much better outcomes from the entire road user charges system. It's my understanding that they're highly efficient light diesel vehicles that are currently probably paying far more than their fair share with the changes that were introduced by this government to the road user charges system. And really the entire vehicle licensing, registration, road user charges, petrol tax, all of these systems that we have for raising revenue are also an opportunity to use economic instruments to clean up our fleet, to get more efficient vehicles and safer vehicles on the road. And that opportunity has been missed. So here we are after 11 p.m. on a Wednesday night, debating this minor change, which is primarily going to benefit a few farmers. And that's fine. I mean, they don't use the road so much with their fast tractors, and I suppose it's entirely fair. But it does say something about the priorities of this government, that with the transport portfolio, they're not taking the opportunity to reduce the transport costs and the burden on households and businesses in New Zealand, which is probably a major drag on our economic development at this point in time. It's been about 6 or 7 years since we've seen any increase in vehicle kilometers traveled on our roads. So households and businesses aren't traveling as much, or well, they're not traveling more, even though there's more people, population has increased. That's because oil prices have been high. That's impacted on economic development. And so here's an opportunity to reduce the burden of transport costs, and that's going to get more economically efficient outcomes for the country. And yet the National Party apparently is completely unaware of the fact that New Zealanders are having to spend 3 or 4 times more than government just to use the infrastructure that's being provided with their tax money. I think it's important to explain this. I'm not sure everyone in the House is aware of this. Of course, road user charges contribute to the National Land Transport Fund, as do petrol taxes. Petrol taxes, by the way, have increased significantly in the past 5 years. Their contribution to the National Land Transport Fund has increased 92% since 2007-2008. Light road user charges contribution to the National Land Transport Fund has increased 37%, so much less. And heavy road user charges contribution to the National Land Transport Fund increased by only 20%. So the changes that the National Party introduced to the road user charges system did not result in a commensurate increase in the amount that truck drivers and heavy vehicle commercial users were paying for the roads compared to your average Kiwi family. So Kiwi families are having to pay much more, and yet the infrastructure being provided by the government, 75% of the budget for new infrastructure is just going on a few state highways that primarily benefit freight, and actually only accommodate about 4% of the daily vehicle trips. Now, surely that's not a logical allocation of resources, and it's certainly not the best way to get better economic outcomes from our transport investment. So as I was saying before, the National Land Transport Fund, which is now much more contributed by petrol taxes from average Kiwi households, and partially funded by road user charges by heavy vehicles and light diesel vehicles. That's about $3 billion a year. About $3 billion a year is spent by central government on transport infrastructure. And it's not true that roads are entirely paid for by road users, because there's another $1 billion that is spent on transport infrastructure that comes from your rates. So local government spends about contributes about $1 billion to transport infrastructure. All of that comes from property owners, ratepayers, well, even renters, because renters pay rates through their rent. So we've got $1 billion, a quarter of the transport infrastructure is paid for by rates, not by road users. We've got another $3 billion that's paid for by road users in some way, but not in a direct way. Not in the way that you pay a toll to use the road the vast majority of the time. And even when one does pay to use a toll, like, for example, at the Northern Gateway, the amount raised by that toll doesn't even cover the cost of collection, or it barely covers the cost of collection. So it doesn't contribute to the building of the infrastructure. So anyway, so government is taking off ratepayers and taxpayers $4 billion and spending it on transport infrastructure, the vast majority of which is roads, and a huge portion of which are a few new state highways that have terrible business cases that carry only 4% of daily vehicle trips. And yet Kiwi households and businesses have to spend 4 times more than this just to use that infrastructure. So last year, we spent $8 billion importing oil. We're not importing any more than we did 5 years ago, but we're spending twice as much on it. And we spent $8 billion. And I would have thought that the Minister for Energy and Resources would know that we don't use the oil produced offshore in New Zealand in our cars and trucks. We don't even have the capacity to refine it. And even if we did have a big find off the shore of New Zealand, the minister should know that that would not affect the amount that New Zealanders pay at the pump, because we pay the international price of oil. And so we're going to be paying the same amount for oil, whether or not it's produced here, whether or not it's spilt and destroys our shores. It's not going to benefit Kiwi households. But of course the minister wouldn't know something like that. Why would he know that? The real question, sir...
Order, please. Order. I can't hear, and if I can't hear, it's not fair on the speaker. I asked, give the speaker a fair go. Julian Gender.
Mr. Speaker, New Zealand households and businesses are spending, well, last year they spent $3 billion on vehicles. Now, that 3 plus 8, for those who can't do math on the National Party side of the House, is $11 billion, and that's slightly more than our current account deficit. So our transport system is highly inefficient because it forces us to spend $11 billion at least just to use the infrastructure being built with our tax dollars. And that is the major oversight that unfortunately the National Party has not grasped, that they have the opportunity to invest in more choice. That means it does mean better buses and trains, which I know New Zealanders want, safer walking and cycling, which I know New Zealanders want. And that will not only save them money, it will not only provide cleaner, healthier communities, but it will actually free up the roads for those people who still need to drive. And that is smart green transport, and unfortunately this government has not seen the light. It appears they never will. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call Mike Sabin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That was a valiant contribution from Julianne Genter. I suggest the approach, the take down the leader approach might be